take me back to when swimming was introduced to you as a sport, not so much just, lessons or, swimming with your family, but when swimming was introduced to you. How old were you? Where were you? And how did that come about?
It was in Royal Oak. Ironically enough, it all stems through my sister. She was already swimming at Penguins of Royal Oak, and there was this Bring a Buddy program. If you brought somebody, you got a free month of dues. And I wasn't doing much, so my parents were like, well, you're going to go for at least a month because we're going to get a free month of dues. And so it started with that. And so I went for a month, and I liked it. It wasn't great. We had a pool in our backyard, so I'd always swam my entire life. But after that month, they're like, do you want to keep going? And somehow the answer was yes. I wasn't a great swimmer when I was really young. I was okay. I think I went to the Dearborn Freezer, not a Dearborn Freezer. I was the one in Jackson, the C meet, the long course C meet, and swam pretty well there. And it was like, okay, maybe he's got some moderate amount of talent that maybe he can keep going, and kind of took off from there. I remember it was really when I was, I think, about 11 that I everything kind of clicked when I realized I could be decent at the sport. Same thing for my sister. So she had moved up in an age group, and the practices actually switched pools at this point. So up until then, we were the same pool at different times. Maybe it was a little easy to facilitate carpooling, but when we switched pools, it was harder. And my parents essentially begged Tom Russo to let me swim with the older kids. He's like, I don't think he's ready. And he was absolutely right. But he's like, my dad's like, he'll stay in lane 6. He won't do anything. He'll just, we just can't get two different kids to two different practices. And I remember it was one practice, and I just sat there and I was swimming, and I was like, I think I could swim faster. And then I just swam faster that practice. And after the practice, it was kind of like, do you think you could swim that fast all the time? And I was like, well, I think so. And they're like, well, why haven't you been doing it? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if it was lack of direction, lack of motivation, but it just kind of clicked. And then from there, it turned into a little bit of a snowball effect for me when I was about 12. And I started getting much better, started winning a lot of events, and was able to have a wide breadth. Tom Russo back in the day wasn't trying to peg me into one hole, whether it was one stroke, it was all the distances, not really sprint freestyles. I'm still really short. Not really helpful, but size definitely helps, especially when you're that young. But so yeah, it's kind of the evolution of how the sport got started for me.
I love it. Of all the guys I've talked to, you are definitely the only guy whose career started essentially because of a coupon. That's really
100%
that's
discount,
really cool.
1 month free dues. Just get in there, go splash around for a month, whatever.
I think so you remember swimming and having a conscious thought, go faster.
It was one day at practice. It was, I just remember thinking I could swim faster at that practice. I don't know why it was that set or that day. I just felt better. And I also think it was probably a big result of the group I was in at that point. At that point, everybody's really fast, and I'm clearly the slowest. I'm the youngest. And it was kind of a survival mode, I would assume, right? That I don't have anywhere to go but up. So instead of trying to get in people's way, I just better go faster. And then we went from lane 6 to lane 5, lane 5 to lane 4, and then it just kind of kept going from there. Because the Penguins back in the day was a pretty small team. It was never a huge team. After Tom left the club, I think it was probably right after I was 12. So I definitely remember doing 11-12 state meet with him. Had a really good 12-year-old year. And then I think it was 13, I moved over to Ole, because that was the hard part of trying to figure out where to go from there. At that point, Tom was kind of directing me towards one of two clubs, Ole being one of them. And it just felt like the right atmosphere that I could really grow. They had a really strong group of swimmers, male and female, a lot of leadership. Scott Peters was coaching at the time, a really great coach. More distance oriented as opposed to shorter distances and stuff like that, which favored me. And it was perfect.
You probably touched on it, but one thing that I like to ask each swimmer is about breakthrough moments and kind of moments where they kind of realize I could be pretty good at this. Is that meet or that kind of time in your life, that 12-year-old year that you kind of described there in that state meet, or did it happen earlier?
It was probably leading up to there. I was doing pretty well, but it was really, I remember 12 and under state meet and short course state meet. I went in there thinking I could win a few events. I ended up winning all of them except for two. And I remember I got second in both of them. It was 500 free and the 50 fly. But I won. I am backstroke, 100 fly probably. I won the 200 free in a surprise. I beat Jeff Moores. He was kind of the standard at that point. He's the one who beat me in the 500 free, but I would end up beating him in the 200 free. And I remember having a conversation before that race with another swimmer, and they're like, you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. And it was really the first time someone ever told me that, because for the most part, I just assumed, oh, I'm going to lose that race to him, but I can win the other ones. But I won that race, and my dad's got this video, and you can get as the race goes on, and he starts jumping up and down and shaking in the camera, and he's, go Randy, because no one expected me to win that race, not even my parents, you know. So I won high point for the first time, and I think from then on, I mean, most meets I went to, aside from when I was 13 and aged up into that age group, but most any meet that I did a full array of events, I mostly won high point. So it was that point, it was really the springboard. Tom really believed in me. He really honed my technique, that was everything. My entire career was based simply off technique, right? I'm not bigger. I'm not faster. I was faster than most people, but not stronger. No, never bigger and stronger. I was 5'9" at my apex. You know, I was 146 pounds when I went to the Olympic trials. I mean, that's nothing compared to the guys you're really swimming against, especially when you look at now, you know, Peter Vanderkay, one of my really good friends. I mean, I see him nowadays, he's a giant compared to me, but that's like, and he's one of the average guys, you know, he's not one of the bigger guys on the pool deck. So it was always that about technique and learning how to swim really well and really smart. But it was definitely 12 and under state meet, I think, was like the first time that I realized I could have a lot of success in the sport.
I would imagine beating Jefferson was a huge confidence builder. I actually knew Jefferson from when he was really young, and he wouldn't know me the same way, but Jefferson swam, I want to say, for the Michigan Marlins. I think that was the name of their team. Whatever the team name was, they practiced at Eastern Michigan immediately after I swam at Eastern Michigan, and they practiced immediately after we got out. So it was not unusual for Jefferson literally to be standing behind our lanes as we were touching at 5:30, and they were going in over us at 5:30 or whenever. And so I started seeing him around, and guys in our program were aware, like, you heard about this kid that's, you know, and so we were aware that he was really good. And I'm sure if we were aware he was really good, you really knew he was really good. That had to be a big confidence booster for you, you know, and I think you're describing that, but I'm not surprised that was a springboard for you.
Yeah, for sure. Because like I said, I think he was a standard when I was about 11. It mostly went through him. There were a couple other guys, bigger guys and stuff like that, that either aged up. But yeah, I would say he was the guy that had the target on his back up until then.
He stayed a standard.
Yeah.
It wasn't just till you were 11. He stayed one, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, up until then, it was like, because I would just always try to target, and that was it. And but at that point, I never thought I could beat him in the freestyles. There was just no way. Because at that point, we were swimming different events, really. I was a little bit more – actually, I was more backstroke when I first started. Backstroke and IM. Eventually moved over to, like, butterfly and IM. But, yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about swimming influences here before we get, you know, to that high school career and everything that came with Ole. I imagine as you're moving to Ole at age 12, 13, that some of those influences really start to come about. Tell me who is most impactful in your swimming career, kind of as an 18 and under?
Honestly, I think it all starts with the coaching staff, right? From Tom Russo really starting to hammer in the technique aspect of swimming, then to Scott to just really embracing me as a new guy into the team that already had a lot of older, good guys, and then with Jeff Cooper. I mean, the relationship with Jeff Cooper and I was unparalleled. there would be no way my career would have had the trajectory it had towards the end if it wasn't for Jeff. It can't be understated how important he was personally and athletically to me. It's simply almost because, I mean, he really took me under his wing like his son. Um, I wouldn't have been able to make half the practices if it wasn't for Jeff. So my parents both worked. We lived in Royal Oak. We drove up to OU for practice. So at 4:45, I'm waking up my dad. Hey, I got to go. He dropped me off. Jeff would drive me all the way down to Detroit, to UD. And then Jeff lived about 35, 40 minutes north of OU. And he'd drive 2 hours home every morning. So he was making them around a 3-hour round trip just to make sure I could get to morning practices. And I mean, nowadays you can't even do that because you can't be left alone in the car with the coach. You can't travel with a coach. Like those were things, and my parents didn't have the time to take off for all the travel meets we went to. And so I would travel with the coaches, and a lot of times I would sleep on a cot. The 3 coaches would be out going out and stuff like that. But it was the most integral relationship I have ever had. It can't be understated. And the same thing too with that same thing. It wasn't necessarily a swimming influence, but just a functional relationship. But my family, I would never have been able to be as successful in swimming without them, because it not only took my parents, but it took my sisters getting me to and from practice and getting me back and forth to make sure I never missed a beat. My sisters gave up tons of time and personal time with their friends to make sure I got to practice. So I was very, very fortunate to have the infrastructure. In terms of swimming influences, honestly, I could name almost every guy at Ole that was older than me, because on some level, one, they were bigger and faster at that point, right? And so they always was someone I could target. Okay, I'm going to try to beat this person who's in my lane, or for this set or this stroke and stuff like that. But I think Mario Scuss was probably the fastest guy at the team at the time. Brett Holcomb, he went to D3 school, was never one of the fastest guys in the state, but he was a great influence and one of the hardest workers I've ever met. And then as we got older, it was a myriad of people. I mean, Peter's older brother, Christian, Justin Zumstag, Andrew Taylor. Ironically, Peter wasn't very good when we were younger. He was kind of flailing. He was a weird, awkward kid. He wasn't super fast. It wasn't until much later in his career that him and I, after college and I came back, him and I would just go to practices and just battle. Him and I almost sometimes just ourselves in the pool, just going at each other. And we were really lucky at Ole, because I think when I was probably about 14, maybe 15, a lot of people migrated from other clubs to Ole. Jenny Vanker came over. Jefferson Moores came back too. He came and trained with us. I mean, he was driving all the way from Northville or wherever it was. So he would actually.
I think they might have been living in Ypsilanti.
And it might have been at Ipsy at that point. So he would drive sometimes to my house. So we would carpool in from my house. He would drive up with me to practice, then drive back. So just cut his drive in half. But I mean, so we had so many people come from other clubs to train with us. And at that point, the team kept getting better and deeper. And there wasn't a day where you could let your guard down. You had to be on your A game every day if you were going to try to go in there and win sets. And I think that atmosphere really made me such a better swimmer.
It has to, right?
Yeah.
How could it not? Because you were a national level swimmer, for such a significant part of your high school career, I'm curious when the national stage was introduced to you. When did you start thinking more broadly than the state of Michigan, and maybe more broadly than your practice lanes, because those
Sure.
sound pretty competitive? What led you to start thinking outside that?
It actually goes all the way back to Penguins again, actually, with Tom Russo when I was 12. Tom was a former Canadian swimmer, so he had Canadian roots, and we would actually go to London and swim meets out there. And so it was never just contained to within the Michigan area. And I remember going to a meet. I was 12. I was probably the better swimmer in Michigan at the time, but I went to, it was called Youth Cup. And they had two guys come from England to go swim there. And I'll tell you what, it was eye-opening, because at the time when I thought I was a better swimmer, I got wrecked. I mean, these 2 kids, one guy was huge. Again, I was small, but he was really fast. And to see someone that much faster and from across the pond, was just unbelievable. I mean, I would have never known at that point that there were that good of swimmers, because you saw, like, I think it was long course 12 and under national rankings. I got second. I was really happy. I got just beat out. It still resonates with me, you know, but so you still think, oh, it's great. But at the same time, you look at it and I was like, the guy I swam a year ago crushed me. And it wasn't like I was that much faster, that much better. But so it was very early on that I got adapted to the national scene. You know, with Jeff too, once Jeff took over Ole, we also made a lot of trips. We went out to Buffalo to different areas and swam, and ended up swimming a lot of meets against people in the Northeast that I was on the national junior team with, or I'd run into circles with. Kyle Salyard's my eventual roommate at freshman year at Georgia, stuff like that. So I was really keen on the national scene from very early on, because a lot of the coaches instilled in me that you're great in Michigan, and that's nothing to be, you know, downplayed, but there's a bigger world out there. And if you really want to tackle it, you really got to, you know, step up your game all the time.
Did you have a chance to be a part of like national select camps and some of those things? Tell me about those experiences.
Those helped too. So I was lucky enough to go to select camp or junior team, the national junior team every year. I don't know if it started in 8th grade, but I went to bronze. I think I went to bronze, silver, then I made the junior team, and then I went to Eagle camp. So I went to all the various levels. I skipped one for the junior team. But that was great because I made a lot of friends in the national circuit from different areas. One of my really good friends, I'm not too much in touch with him anymore at this point, but growing up, Rainer Kendrick, you know, him and I went to these camps all together, and he ended up winning 200 fly my senior year at NCAAs. He went to Texas, great swimmer, butterflyer. And so it was people that I got connected with and kind of just always kept in touch with. And the swimming community is so small. That's the nice part, is that you run into the same people, you travel the same meets essentially, especially when you're going to nationals or juniors before that, Olympic trials. It's all the same people. And so those camps were great because they opened you up to creating relationships with them. But at the same time, it gave you an understanding of, oh, these people were really good. I still remember it was the national junior team camp. And it happened to be, so everyone got selected for a particular event, and we did head-up races. So you literally battled whoever you were swimming against. I remember it happened to be 2 of the girls, but I just remember their performance. It was 200 breast. These girls swam like top 10 in the world times, elevation, Colorado Springs, completely just like battling each other the whole week. And I couldn't believe it. I was jaw dropped. I met Cleet Keller there. I actually get to meet him at the camp. He didn't get to go to camp. He only went to the actual meet. But like Dan Ketchum, you know, I ran into him in Ohio all the time. He was on the team. So there were just so many people. One of my eventual college teammates was there. Harvey was the coach at the junior team meet, stuff like that. So it was a really nice experience to get a good feel. When you're at the camps too, they had Olympians come in and speak to you. So that's generally the goal, right? And that's the thing with, like, when I look back at high school swimming, for me, it's a little bit different. My aim was never to win high school states, to set state records at high school states. That was always going to be icing for me, right? And not to downplay anyone that was their main goal, but I wanted to try to make the Olympics. I always wanted to try to do long course. It was a little more my style. So anything I did at high school states was an add-on at that point. But with the select camps and the national junior team, it was your exposure to USA swimming and the eventual Olympic track they wanted people to be set on was second to none.